The problem is to get people to reject irrational and supernatural explanations of the world, and to accept a social and intellectual apparatus, science, as the only begetter of truth.
Morning, everybody. You guys are pathetic. That's so funny. Shh, Vern. Let's all stand and get some coffee. Come back. Okay. If you're a guest with us, really glad you're here today, and good job getting out of the rack and making it to church. I want to say hi to our congregations that meet in Lockwood and Plentywood and Cody and Butte. Great to be with you guys. And we're starting a series today that's going to deal with some of the tough questions around Christianity. We've been inviting our atheist friends and agnostic friends and anti-theist friends, and if you are in those camps, I just want to say welcome to you. Really glad that you chose to kind of come into an area where you're probably a little bit uncomfortable, and it's not lost on us, the irony, actually, of the last song that we just sang, How Great Is Our God, and you're going, not only is he not great, he isn't there, and so you endured that for a little while, and now, there's a bunch of people around you that actually believe that, and I think have good reasons why, and so we're going to actually talk about some of those today. The series, we do sermons around here in blocks called series, and this is going to go 7 weeks. This is going to take us up to Easter, and the idea is the elephant in the room, some of the kind of difficult questions that we've got to wrestle with around Christianity, because Christianity has some issues. There's good objections, and there's even better questions, and I think we ignore them to our peril, and I think we ignore them to God's disservice, and thanks to the internet, it's getting more difficult to have civil, productive conversations about this. So we're going to be civil and productive and loving and kind, and we're not going to be mean about this as we talk about it together. There are elephant in the room issues that Christians actually choose to ignore, because maybe wrestling with them look like a lack of faith, or because in our insecurity, dealing with them could erode our fundamental, time-honored historical beliefs. We might be well-meaning in that, but thoughtful people dismiss us as narrow and ignorant and fanatical. And we are not that. At least you're not. I might be, but you're not. One of those issues that we're going to deal with today has to do with science. And that quote you heard on that little video excerpt was from famed Harvard geneticist Richard Lewontin, who basically deifies science. Now, Christians have made some mistakes along the way as well. We've seemingly ignored what science says because we think it contradicts the Bible, or we treat the Bible as a textbook, and it isn't one. We've got blights on our history, arresting Galileo for teaching that the earth revolved around the sun, not the other way around. That was an oops. Sometimes guys go, all this talk, here's what I know. My Bible starts with, in the beginning, God, and that's good enough for me. And it's that kind of tone that causes Richard Dawkins to call Christians rednecks, which, if I was an atheist redneck, I'd be offended by that. And so there's this science versus faith fallacy. And I would like to suggest that science and faith, as much as you've heard about the conflict between the two, are actually not in competition one another. Both the atheist and the deist are actually taking it on faith. And I would humbly suggest to you that it's not about science versus faith, it's about good science versus bad science. Now, science, in and of itself, is awesome. It's just great. Matter of fact, you know how sometimes you hear people say, unless you can prove God to me scientifically, I won't believe? I don't know if you've noticed, but you're hearing that a lot less lately, because that's exactly what's happening. Science continues to point to God. The more we learn, the more it's pointing to God. Now, we're going to talk about science, but it's very important that you understand that I am not a scientist. I am a pastor. I am not a scientist. Science is good. I am not good at it. My brain doesn't work that way. I grew up in a family of scientists, however. My father is a geologist by education, a meteorologist by training, and a mortgage banker by occupation. My mother is a biologist and a nutritionist. My brother is an engineer. My sister is a pharmacist. And then there's moi. And you can imagine me, those of you that know me, growing up in that environment, at the dinner table, them all rational and logical, and me all romantic and whimsical, wiggling in my seat. After dinner, them logically and systematically assembling a puzzle while I recklessly but skillfully take the pieces and flick them into the curtain, watching them fall to the ground like leaves on an autumn day. Or better yet, what I would do is actually kind of slide by the puzzle and steal one of the pieces and put it in my pocket. And then they get all done with the puzzle, but then it'd be like, there's a space in it, there's a piece missing. And well, for these poor logical, rational scientists, they're like, we're not gonna be able to sleep until we solve this problem. And was it the manufacturer? Did we lose it? And they're crawling around looking for it. And I walk up and snap it and go, booyah, take that, suckers. Put that in your scientific pipe and smoke it. Anyway, I'm not a scientist, but let's talk about a puzzle for a moment. Anybody do puzzles anymore without pointing and clicking? I don't know. So you know how a puzzle where, like when you go buy the puzzle, you see what the puzzle is because of the box top, right? And so the box top corresponds to the puzzle pieces. You know what you're trying to assemble because you're looking at the box top, and it helps you to look at the box top while you're putting the pieces together, right? So imagine for a moment that the box top and the pieces didn't correspond. That the box top was a mountain scene or something, but the pieces are like a puppy. And how confusing that would be to try to put them together. The puzzle doesn't make sense unless the box top corresponds to all the puzzle pieces that we see. So question. Does anybody have the box top to the puzzle of life? Because every worldview, whether religious or atheist, claims to have the correct picture, the correct box top for the puzzle pieces of life. Now, today, as you might expect, you're in church, I'm going to argue that the scientific and somewhat the philosophical evidence suggests that the box top of an intelligent designer of the universe, and by the way, an intelligent designer of you, is a better box top than the undirected, random chance of natural events suggested by the theory of evolution. And I'm not even going to assert that that designer is the God that we learn about in the Bible. All I want you to do is just to consider that all of this, including you, has been intelligently designed. We've got to deal with the question of how did the universe get here? It was once assumed that the universe was eternal. Not very many people think that anymore. I'll explain why. And once the universe got here, how did you get here? Once there was nothing, then there was something. Did you evolve from the primordial goo, or was there another force at work? And where did the goo come from? That's what we got to work on today, from goo to the zoo to you. I'm not a scientist, so I have to do lots of reading, some cursory reading of guys like Dawkins and Hitchens, but then Norm Geisler, Frank Turek, William Lane Craig, Lee Strobel, Dallas Willard, and others. Okay, so read all those guys, it'll help. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. Talk about divine design. I'm going to talk about design of the universe, and then we're going to talk about design of you. All right? Okay, it's kind of heady stuff today, which is why I'm struggling with it, because I am not a scientist. All right. But philosophically, let's just start with this question here. We can't spend a lot of time on this because it's just too deep, but why is there something rather than nothing? Nothing by definition will give you nothing. And since there's something, and as we'll see, there was once nothing, therefore something came out of nothing, and I have to assume that it was an intelligent being transcendent from me, not dependent on anything, that burst onto the scene, and he did it perhaps with a bang. Remember the first time you heard about the Big Bang? I've been asking people this about for the last month, going, hey, remember the first time you heard about the Big Bang? How was it presented to you? And everybody said the exact same thing. Oh, it was presented to me that we now don't need God. that the explanation of the universe isn't from Genesis, that God created it, but actually it was the Big Bang that happened. Well, that's how it was presented to me the first time. But actually, the Big Bang is evidence of a supernatural explanation of the universe. And as we've learned more and more about it, this becomes, I think, more and more clear. I think Geisler does this deal where he goes, the universe started with a surge. And so we're going to work on that acronym right now. It's in your notes there. Okay, so we're going to go S-U-R-G-E. Here's the S. The S is second law of thermodynamics. Everybody remembers that one because it's so fun to say and it makes you sound smart. Second law of thermodynamics. Basically what this means is that the universe is running out of energy, which means it cannot be eternal like they used to think, because otherwise it would be dead now. It can't be eternal because it's on its way to ending, and eternity doesn't end. There's also the law of entropy related to this, that everything moves towards disorder, and we are not in complete disorder. Therefore, as one astronomer says, if a wind-up clock is running down, then someone must have wound it up. That's the S. The U. The universe is U is universe is expanding. So the theory of general relativity predicted that the universe was expanding. You remember the Hubble telescope? Well, that guy Hubble confirmed it with his telescope. In other words, if you watch the universe in reverse, it collapses back not to a pinpoint, it collapses back to nothing, no space, no time, no matter. Once there was something, and then bang, once there was nothing, and then bang, there was something. Now, this is kind of a trip. The universe is not expanding into space. The space itself is expanding. Once there was no space, and now there's space and it's expanding. Okay, got to move on from that one. Okay, R is radiation from the Big Bang. This is awesome. In 1965, two scientists detected some radiation on their antennas at the Bell Labs. They thought it was bird poop. They thought it was pigeon poop, and so they went up on the roof and cleaned off the antennas and then came back down and realized that it was still there, and it turned out to be one of the most incredible discoveries in the last century. These guys won Nobel Prizes for it. Basically, what they found is the afterglow of an explosion, and that afterglow was predicted 20 years earlier, where they said, look, if there is a Big Bang, there should be this radiation, and they actually found it, and they found it by accident. They went from bird poop to Nobel Prizes for it. G stands for the Great Galaxy Seeds. If there was a Big Bang, there should be variations in temperature of the radiation. And in 1989, NASA sent up a $200 million satellite that you paid for, and looking for those variations, and they found them, and it had incredible precision. The explosion and the expansion was precisely tweaked to cause galaxy formation rather than universal collapse. And the E stands for our boy Einstein and his theory of general relativity, which has been now verified to 5 decimal places. And that theory demands an absolute beginning of time, space, and matter. They are interdependent. You can't have one without the other. And here's what I love about this one. Einstein found his own theory, the theory that made him famous, irritating. His words, not mine. He found the theory of general relativity irritating. And that's because his box top was atheist. And what was irritating to him is the realization that the universe is not eternal and it is not self-existent, which means somehow it got started. And this really vexed him, that he had to consider that his box top needed to include an intelligent designer. So, for me, where once at first blush the Big Bang was proof of a universe without God, now as science is understanding it better and as I'm understanding it better, it's actually proof of not the natural but the supernatural. Nothing will get you nothing every time. You can't get something out of nothing. That means something must have caused our universe. Our universe started with a bang. That means that something other than us, transcendent of us, independent of us, must have started it. Here's one of the ways guys talk about it in a little diagram is V stands for Vern. Just kidding. This would be like just a little illustration of the universe kind of growing and expanding. And it starts at this point right here, and they call this singularity. There's a single beginning. Okay? Now, Stephen Hawking, whose earwax is smarter than me, okay? Stephen Hawking, he sees it more like this. And so, kind of this rounded deal here, meaning there's no start to it. And actually what the universe is basically doing is oscillating, going one direction and then kind of heading the other direction. You know how if you start walking north, and you walk north all the way to the North Pole, and you keep walking, then you'll be walking, what? South? Okay, that's kind of the idea. So it's oscillating back and forth like that. And the problem with this is that he used theoretical, like imaginary numbers to come up with this description here. So don't make fun of that. There's this I make fun of it, but you shouldn't. Imaginary numbers, right? Like, what? But that's that theoretical physics, theoretical math stuff. Okay, it's really, really smart people can do this. Okay, so he uses imaginary numbers for this. When he converts his imaginary numbers back to real numbers, the diagram looks like this, a point of singularity. You see, guys, 100 years ago, it was the Christian who had to take it on faith that despite all the evidence to the contrary, the universe was not eternal, but created. And I would say to you now, it's the exact opposite. It is the atheist that has to take the leap of faith that despite all the evidence to the contrary, that the universe is eternal and was not created. Okay. What I've done so far is, all I wanted to do is show you that the universe got a start. It's not eternal. Okay? Now, equally persuasive in all of that for me is design. So the universe starts with a bang. Nothing will get you nothing. Something had to initiate the bang. I think that initiator is God, but let's just go with an intelligent designer. The universe exploded into being. It's the precision that is so persuasive. So I want to talk about this in terms of a logical syllogism. Do you remember this from your logic class or philosophy or something like that? A syllogism is a couple of premises and a conclusion. This is what's called the teleological argument. Telos in Greek is the word design. Okay, it's just three premises. Here's the first one. Every design implies a designer. If it looks like it's designed, it was probably designed by a designer. 2, the universe has incredible, complex design. Therefore, the universe had a designer. Just a little logical syllogism to kind of think it through. So, what we have here is the common sense assertion that every watch requires a watchmaker. That if you're walking in the woods and you come across a watch laying in the grass, you don't think to yourself, wow, plate tectonics and thawing and freezing and pine needles falling and we got this watch. You don't think that. You go, somebody thought up the watch in their mind first. They designed the watch. They got the parts. They manufactured the watch. They marketed the watch. Somebody bought the watch. Somebody lost the watch. I found a watch. Okay, that you go like, yes, that's somebody's. It's not random. That's this idea right here. So the precision of the universe, balanced as it were on a knife edge, is almost unbelievable. The idea of the universe and its precision happening by chance is virtually impossible. I'd like to talk about this in terms of April 13th, 1970. I was 4 years old, so old timers, you got to help us remember what happened on April 13th, 1970. Apollo 13. Okay, so you guys need to watch the movie at least. Okay, so Apollo 13. Now, in Apollo 13, this was a lunar module. These guys were going to walk on the moon, but there was a problem on the spaceship and an explosion. And so we, from that, have a very famous 5-word sentence. I'll start it, you'll finish it. Houston, we have a problem. All right, and here was the problem. There was an explosion, and oxygen tank number 2, and that set off a series of events that made things very precarious for those astronauts. So for instance, their oxygen level. They were going to be running out of oxygen because they lost an oxygen tank and another one was damaged. And in your atmosphere, what you're breathing right now, 21% of the atmosphere is oxygen. If it was 25%, fires would erupt spontaneously. If it was 15%, we would all suffocate. Then these guys need to get home. Now they got to change directions, and so the way they're going to do that is sling around the moon, and they're going to utilize the moon-Earth gravitational interaction. If the moon-Earth gravitational interaction was too great, the tides would be too severe. If it was any less, climate would be unstable. Either way, life would be impossible. Then, as they come back around the moon and they're going to come through the Earth's atmosphere, they have to come through it at 5.5 degrees and no more than 7.3 degrees. Any deviation and they will skip off the atmosphere, tumbling into space forever, or they will burn up going through it. Then there's the issue of the carbon dioxide that they were struggling with because of the lack of oxygen. And in your atmosphere today, right now, if the carbon dioxide levels were any higher, we would all burn up. If it was any lower, we'd all suffocate. Then there's the issue of gravity. If the gravitational force of our Earth was altered by, this is incredible, 0.01 to the 37th power, our sun would not exist and neither would you. Incredible precision. These are the constants, the laws that these guys were battling with. So, you know the story. They have just enough oxygen. They sling around the moon. They get through the atmosphere. Gravity pulls them at 25,000 miles per hour. The parachutes deploy. They land safely, and the nation breathes a sigh of relief. Now, what was the problem in the first place? They caused all of that. Why did oxygen tank number 2 explode? It happened because oxygen tank number 2 dropped 2 inches during assembly. Years before the event, during assembly, a 2-inch drop caused all this problem. So, like a small change in a spaceship, a small change in the universe would result in big problems for us. I've given you some 5 constants. Here's a few more. If the centrifugal force of the planetary movements did not precisely balance the gravitational force, nothing could orbit around the sun. If the universe had expanded at a rate 1/1,000,000th more slowly than it did, expansion would have stopped. The universe would have collapsed on itself before any stars had formed. If it was any faster, no galaxies would have formed. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, the Earth would be bombarded with space material because the gravitational force of Jupiter acts like a cosmic vacuum cleaner, sucking in asteroids and comets that would otherwise strike the Earth. I've now given you 8 constants. There are 122, so let's keep going. Just kidding. 122 of these constants. Astrophysicist Hugh Ross calculated that the chance of all of those 122 constants happening by chance is 1 chance in 10 to the 138th power. For you visual learners, it looks like this. I'm just saying, no way that this happens by chance. It's why Geisler and Turek wrote a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Because of that leap. Nobel laureate Arno Penzias, who's the co-discoverer of that radiation afterglow that I showed you, said this: astronomy leads us to a unique event. Boom! A universe that was created out of nothing and delicately balanced, design, to provide exactly the conditions required to support life. In the absence of an absurdly improbable accident, the observations of modern science seem to suggest an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. I think he's right, and I also think that you are a part of that plan. What we've done so far is, all I'm trying to do is go, it started. Then I'm saying something intelligent must have started it because of the design, the very complex design, everything sort of holding together. That's all inorganic. Let's talk organic now and the design of life. And I'd like to talk about this in terms of alphabets. Remember Alphabet cereal? Some of you had mothers that bought you Alphabets cereal. No good mother today buys their children Alphabet cereal because we have actually learned scientifically that cardboard with sugar on it is not good for the children. It's also not good for their teachers because they have a sugar crash around 10 a.m. and become a behavior problem in the class, causing the teacher to curse you, Mom. So, no good mom does that. Parenting sermon series is in June. We'll get to that more then. Okay, Alphabet cereal. Now, God, I hope I didn't offend anybody that's got alphabets at home right now. But really, it's child abuse. Throw it away. Okay, so suppose, take it for one that has sugar pancreas issues. Okay. Oh yeah, alphabets. Okay, I was thinking about my pancreas. Okay, so suppose you got out of bed one morning and you came to the kitchen table and the box of alphabets has been spilled on the kitchen table. And as you look at that, you notice that some of the pieces are the little, letters, alphabet letters there, are in a sentence. And the sentence says, "Take out the garbage, Mom." Now, you've been going to school, and you've been learning that the universe came about by random chance. You've learned that the Darwinists and the naturalists are saying that life generated spontaneously from non-living chemicals of natural laws without any intelligent intervention. And you go, wow, what a coincidence that it spells that. I'm glad I don't need to adhere to that because it was certainly an accident that it says that Mom didn't do that and you don't take out the garbage, and when she gets home later, you're in trouble. Now, maybe in the 19th century, without our current technology, there would have been an excuse for that line of thinking, but I don't think today you get that excuse. As telescopes are seeing farther out into space, microscopes are seeing deeper into the components of life. Take the amoeba. Tiny little amoeba. We all like the amoeba because it oozes. Darwinists say that this one-celled amoeba came about by spontaneous generation without intelligent intervention, like your mom, in a little pond somewhere in the ancient earth, and all of biological life evolved from that. This is the idea of macroevolution. That this is from goo to the zoo to you. That there's changes within the species and it starts, or from species to species, and it starts, just from this tiny little amoeba. That was sort of the beginning of it all. Now, forget birds evolving from reptiles and forget man evolving from apes. Darwinists still haven't proven this. Darwin himself even said in his theory, look, if the fossil record doesn't support my theory here, then it's all goes away. It's all false. I got it wrong. And we know that they haven't been able to support it yet with the fossil record, and we know that the Cambrian explosion is going to make it even more difficult for that to happen, that there is no, as you would call it, missing link, hasn't been found yet. So we got problems. We understand some variations within species. What we're having trouble with is from species to species. So all that stuff aside, the bigger problem is explaining the origin of the first life. Nobody's been able to explain how the first life, the little amoeba, could have sprung forth spontaneously from non-living chemicals. And to make it worse, it turns out that the amoeba isn't all that simple. On the contrary, 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick discovered deoxyribonucleic acid. And I am going to draw for you deoxyribonucleic acid. Art. You know how they talk about right brain, left brain, and the scientists are left brain, and the artists are right brain? I'm not a scientist, and you're going, and you're not an artist. I am neither left brain nor right brain. I have no brain. Not qualified at all to be up here, but nevertheless. Okay. All right, now, we know this is, what's it called? This is DNA. All right, obviously. So DNA, has been talked about as like the blueprint of life, which actually is not a very good description. It's more like a library. DNA is the language of life. DNA provides the genetic information from which all the proteins out of which our bodies are built. It is this very complex code that tells the body what it is, and everything gets created because of the code or the instructions, the manual that is DNA. It's the very specific code that creates the eye, the fingernail, the colon. I just use colon in a sermon. All that stuff. They talk about it as specified complexity because it is specific and complex. Now, famous atheist and Darwinist Richard Dawkins admits that the message found in just the nucleus of the tiny amoeba is more than 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica combined. And he admits that the entire amoeba has as much information in its DNA, just the amoeba has as much information in its DNA as 1,000 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. It is not random. It's very specific. It's specified complexity. And so, I'm just asking you, if you know that in an intelligent being like your mother spelled, take out the garbage, you know that that did not happen by random chance when the box fell over. Why did Darwinists think that a message 1,000 encyclopedias long happened by random chance? And that's just the amoeba, which you can't see without magnification, so small. That's just the amoeba, not even you, not the human eye, for instance. Could that have spontaneously erupted through random chance? Humbly, I would say, this is good science versus bad science. Now, no human observed this. No human observed the first life, but we're not using observation science. This is the mistake people make when they go, hey, prove God to me scientifically. They're talking about observation science, but we can't observe it. What we are talking about is forensic science. Forensic science, you know what this is, right? Those of you that watch CSI Miami, CSI New York, CSI Los Angeles, CSI Plentywood, CSI Butte, okay? That's forensic science. It's kind of gruesome. Here's this crime scene, and they use some laws and observation to piece together what happened. Okay, so Flathead Lake. Since I was a little kid, been going to Flathead Lake just about every year, just to get some time away. My parents used to take us up there when we were kids, my science family and me. And it was when I was a little kid that I first heard about the legend of the Flathead Monster. You know about this? There's a legend that there is a flathead monster, maybe a prehistoric something or other living in the depths of the Flathead Lake. There's really two reasons why they talk about the flathead monster. One is because of the sightings. People say they've seen the flathead monster. We've got no pictures, we've got no video, but people have seen the flathead monster, probably when they were, hey, look at that, and then crash their boat into the shore, that whole deal. Okay, so maybe they saw the monster, and that's what veered them into the shore. Okay. There's that. The other reason that people talk about a flathead monster is this. You may be sitting on the shore in the middle of the night. Maybe there's no moon. There's no wind. Water's flat. It's quiet. And all of a sudden, waves start coming into the shore. You heard nothing out there, no motorboat went by, and yet here comes the waves, and you're using forensic science to go, something must have caused those waves, and you conclude the flathead monster. Now, it's not great science, but this is, really what this is the principle of uniformity. The principle of uniformity is something scientists use that basically says the world worked in the past like it does today. So, for instance, when a geologist like my father sees ripples in sedimentary layers, he concludes, ripples, that kind of looks like water would have done that. And then, while he's sitting in his backyard, he notices a little pond or a puddle receding, and he notices in the mud that there are ripples in the mud, and he concludes, that sedimentary layer, that was underwater once, and the water receded and left these ripples in here. That's the principle of uniformity. That's forensic science. Take out the garbage requires an intelligent cause. Wouldn't 1,000 encyclopedias of information in one amoeba also? One more way to look at it. Here's two geologic features. Grand Canyon and Mount Rushmore. One of them was created naturally over time. Another one wasn't natural. It was created intelligently. Not saying anything about the intelligence of the presidents. I'm saying an intelligent being created that. Now, one of the upsides, I suppose, of being a simple person like me is that this just becomes self-evident and obvious. Yet Richard Dawkins, in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, which Dallas Willard says more honestly should be titled The Blind Watchmaker Maker, says, quote, "Biology is the study of complicated things that give their appearance of having been designed for purpose." He denies that it was intelligently designed, even though it appears that it was, violating even the principle of uniformity. Francis Crick, the guy that discovered DNA, he's an ardent Darwinist, and here's what he said: "Biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. It's so incredible, don't fall for it. It evolved. I know it looks like a supreme intelligent designer designed it, but don't fall for it. Got to remember it's evolved." What is that? That's commitment to the box top. It's bad science. It's a commitment to, this is how I think the world goes, and don't bother me with the evidence. When you watch Cosmos, some of you will tonight, keep in mind, commitment to the box top. The puzzle pieces, just in and of themselves, as you start to assemble them, they say intelligent design, but the Darwinist is so committed to his box top, a world without God, I think they refuse the obvious and maybe even cut the pieces and repaint them so that they say what their box top says. So committed are some to the box top. Some evolutionists have actually suggested that aliens are what deposited the first life form here. Not joking about this. It's actually got a name. It's called panspermia, which means sperm everywhere. And what they did was, after calculating that the probability of life arising by spontaneous generation is essentially zero, they hatched the alien story, and that is blind commitment to the box top, because if it's true, let's just give it to them. If it's true, aliens are what put the first life here, then you still got to go, well, who created the aliens? How did they get there? Robert Jastrow, who's the founder and former director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies and the author of the book God and the Astronomers, says this, I put this one in your notes, that there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. This is kind of what I've been asserting, that science is, as we learn more, continues to prove that there's at least a supernatural explanation to the universe, an intelligent designer. The universe is wonderfully and intricately designed. Life is wonderfully and intricately designed. Every design implies somebody designed it. The universe has complex design. Therefore, the universe must have had a designer. Now, let me close with a couple of comments, two things. Here's the first one. What I'm about to say, I'd like you to not tweet. And what I'm about to say, I would like you to please resist the temptation to quote me out of context. Because for some of you, this is going to be a little alarming. For some of you, you're going to go, oh, I feel so much better. This is going to sound odd coming from your pastor, but here it goes. Sometimes I don't believe in God. Sometimes I don't believe in God. What happens is I'm usually alone, and I'm thinking, and ironically, sometimes even praying. And I'm struggling, and I'm dealing with some doubts. The issue for me is not typically suffering and evil, which is a big issue for lots of people, and I respect that. We're going to talk about that one in a few weeks. The issue for me is more that I feel alone. I feel like God isn't there, that he's not interested in me, he's not helping me. It might be at a time when I really feel like I need a miracle and it isn't happening. And I begin to doubt that God is even there. Now, for those that have experienced this with me, now that just so you know, this doesn't happen to me every morning. This is very infrequent, but it happens every once in a while. And just so you know, the Bible writers, it happened to them too. You can read it in the Bible. What happens is, at that point, I just do a quick review. And my brain always goes back to the universe. When I'm struggling with evidence for God, I just go back to the universe and I think through the incredible precision of the universe and all those 122 constants and how they all got to be in place, and bless you. And I start to go like, yep, there has to be an intelligent designer. And then I think of my beautiful wife and my beautiful daughters, and I think of puppies and blades of grass and the duckbill platypus. And I'm like, life couldn't have been spontaneously generated from inorganic stuff. Yes, there's this intelligent designer. And then I start to review stuff and I start filling in the gaps, you see. I start thinking about Jesus, the historical figure that he is, and his death, and I think about his resurrection, that it's actually true, and I'll talk about that one at Easter, why I believe that. And see what happens? I start filling it all back in, and then I'm like, I'm good. Okay, God's there. He seems a little distant right now. That's not an abnormal thing. I trust you, and off I go, and I'm good. And I'm more convinced than ever. But for me, what the point I want to make here, you guys, is for me, what kind of rekindles it all is this issue that we're talking about right here. The teleological argument for the existence of God. That the incredible design of the universe attests to a God, and then I would say a God who loves you, but we'll talk about that in weeks ahead. Okay, that's the first thing. Don't misquote me. Second, you're in church, and I have not given you a Bible verse yet. And some of you are like, oh, this has been great. He's not been using the Bible. That's helpful. And others are like, he's not even a Christian. How's he our pastor? He's not even used the Bible yet. Okay, so here we go. I'm trying to make everybody happy. But now, really, this verse here, boom. Okay, here we go. This is Romans 1. For since the creation of the world, now the Apostle Paul is writing this, widely regarded, one of the smartest people ever. For since the creation of the world, and he is assuming creation, see, God's invisible qualities, some things about God that you can't see, like his eternal power and his divine nature, you can't prove that scientifically, but you can forensically because it has clearly been seen, being understood from, here it is, what has been made. So this is what happens to me. I go, I see God because of what has been made. And then look at this line. So that men and women are without excuse. I'm without excuse. And so are you. If you're an atheist today, I want to say I'm really proud of you for coming in and listening to this lecture and considering the stuff that I'm saying that I think is true. I would humbly suggest to you that your issues maybe aren't about science, because science keeps pointing to an intelligent designer. And the design of the universe says that you are actually without excuse. And so I would suggest to you that maybe something else is going on, and I would invite you to explore that. Life is kind of a puzzle. There's a bunch of puzzle pieces. We've all got our box top. But if you try to just set your box top aside and start putting the pieces together, I think you will see an intelligent designer. And next week, we'll investigate more about who that intelligent designer might be. Okay? All right. Now, you're in church, so we're going to pray. And so if you're not a God believer, we're still going to ask you just to respect this moment. We're going to talk to God for a few moments. So if you would please all lay prostrate and get your wallets out. Just kidding. You're going to get in a posture of prayer, which usually just kind of gets in a quiet place with your eyes closed, and I'd like you to just think for a few moments about God. If you're a Christian, you maybe have some things you want to say to him, ask him, talk to him about. Maybe you want to worship him because of how powerful he is. And, you know how there's some awe around universe and creation and causes worship. All right, if you're not a God believer yet, would you just please take a moment to maybe just in some quietness right here, just crack open your heart just a tiny little bit, make a little bit room for the possibility that God, an intelligent designer, is there and that he's actually interested in your life. And you could just, it might feel awkward to you, but you could talk to him, ask him some questions, maybe ask him to reveal himself to you, just because you're an intellectually honest person. And so if God's there, you actually want to know. And so just crack your heart open just for a moment for the possibility of God. I'll leave you in a time of meditation now on that. God, I want you to know, again, I certainly believe in you, and I thank you for revealing your character and your power through your creative genius. Causes me to be in awe of you and to worship you and to be that much more impressed with you and want to know you. I want to know the one who is so amazing. Father, I would pray for our atheist and anti-theist and agnostic friends that are with us today. God, I pray really compassionately and respectfully for them that you, God, in your majesty and in your intimacy would reveal yourself to them. Some things we know about you that we really haven't talked about today is how much you love humanity. Would you please express your love to them? And I pray that it would even be undeniable as they maybe have a moment where they are become very aware of you and your presence, and that would cause them to continue the search for truth and meaning and purpose and this transcendent being that put everything into motion and includes us. So please be gracious unto us, God, as you continue to reveal yourself to Christians and non-Christians alike, that we would all respond appropriately in awe and humility and submission to you. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.